Well, with Vanguard, OverDress, and WillDress done, I think it's a good time to actually do this and rank the top 10 fights throughout the anime. And hopefully I did not do this too early because I presume this is where YuYu's story is supposed to end. But anyway, like usual, I rank these based on how the fight goes along with the character interactions, because that's very important for the motivation for the fight. To me, a fight doesn't really have much meaning if they're just for no reason, and character dynamics are always awesome. But anyway, before we begin, just to give a little bit overall opinion about the OverDress, WillDress cast along with the show, I think it's not too bad and the cast is actually pretty good if they actually give them more time, because there was a lot of good stuff that happened, especially at WillDress. WillDress is where it started falling off, but due to the lack of episode runs, aka 12 to 13 episodes per season, we also lacked the character development despite having such a huge cast. The single episode characters that we get for their moments are pretty nice and all, but some of them are not really built up or just rushed. Or even if we are built up, yeah, they are just rushed, and some of them just feel out of nowhere because of that. And this is mainly WillDress season 2 and 3. Regular OverDress, spoiler alert, season 1 OverDress does not have any top fights in this list, but the rest really goes pretty well, especially with characters. But anyway, no more waste of time and let's begin. On the bottom of my list, which is number 10, it's Mirei vs Urara. This list was already pretty hard to make as it was, since a lot of fights were really good, but this just barely made it to top 10 for me because the character interactions was pretty good. It was actually pretty cute. It's just two people who just wants to get to know each other, and also because this is a tournament, we're just trying to give it our all. I like how Mirei's interaction with Urara is trying to see her actual way when she's focused, basically giving Urara a very strong obstacle since she hasn't overcome her little flaw of being basically not paying attention. And also for lore reason, between Basagura and Leonord, I just love that part as well as symbolism. But I have to say the fight was also pretty good as well, because the back and forth, it was kind of hard to tell who would win, especially Mirei being a previous antagonist. Even though Urara has a good chance of winning as well, because we know her character at that point, where when she gets too focused on one thing, she doesn't pay attention to anything else but that one thing, and even she doesn't even notice that she's winning, which I always found funny. But the minute she focuses on one thing, it makes her go much more stronger and much more fierce. And also Basagura versus Leonord, I love that little screenshot. So yes, and now to number 9, which is another Mirei fight. It's YuYu versus Mirei, the final fight of OverDress. Now this is only the number 9 on my list because yes, it is the build-up final battle, and of course it was going to be predictable, but the character interaction and the build-up to it was also pretty nice, but not like the best. I do like the connection of these two characters. For one, Mirei was the original owner of Trickstar, and now YuYu is using Trickstar against her, and I love that part. And the other part I really love about this fight is basically Mirei herself, basically a very flawed character who believes that she should be fighting alone since she has a problem with trusting everyone due to her blindness. And I really like how they use her blindness as a factor to her character. Basically, she always feels very paranoid about everyone lying about her in her life because she's blind. She can't see, so she can never know what's really going on. And I really like how YuYu is trying to reach her here, and Danji really wanting that as well, despite still siding with Mirei. And into the fight itself, I say it was not too bad, but since it was focused more on the character, the fight wasn't completely amazing. I did like the shot of Basagura going on full offensive mode with sword and gun. I like that she used both in one turn, especially with the trick moon. And then I also like Mahar Nirvana with Esperidia. I think that was a pretty cool turn, and I also like the fact that YuYu didn't just win right there and Mirei got an over trigger. And then at that point, we don't even know who was going to win the fight, because when I first watched the episode, I was not expecting the over trigger at all. I was expecting Esperidia and win, but that didn't happen. She got over trigger and then basically just realized just have fun, even though that felt sudden. Yes, that was the build up to Mirei's arc where she learns to trust other people. There's actually kind people and there's mean people basically, and I like what the trick moon symbolizes for her, but also what Trickstar basically represents, and I like how the fight ended, with Trickstar basically going at her heart. The original owner of the card losing to her very own card that now she passed on to basically, and I love that. So overall, the fight was pretty decent. The character interaction was okay. The fight was not like super overall amazing, but I really like basically full armor Basagura along with Mahar and Esperidia. And also the fact that the fight didn't just end right there, making it more unpredictable. And then number 8 8, we got Toya versus Masanori. I mainly love this fight for the character interaction and the build up to it, because yeah, those two characters know each other. The fight was okay, but mainly for the character interaction once again. After what Masanori did to him, Toya does not even feel vengeful. In fact, he's thankful to Masanori that he actually kind of gave him a life even though it was unintentional. And this was something I love about this fight. It's Toya's acknowledgement that without Masanori, he would still be like the plain, boring person, not knowing what to do with his life. And even though Masanori was admitting that he was just using him, Toya didn't care, and I love that part. I just love the character relationship here. Especially, Masanori's true intention is just basically see the world as his entertainment. Basically, there's always interesting stuff and he just wants to see what's fun. He even laughs at the ideology of the uniformers, and I love that part too because he's just there just to see what they will do because it's just interesting. But overall, the character interaction is nice. The fight itself was okay. Love seeing the new Bastion, especially when it clashes with Zorga Mask, especially on that same final turn with that shot. Toya was basically trying to use Bastion's second part skill of the restand, giving the rearguard drive checks, and it's basically drive check rearguard turn. And I love that build up part, but the fight itself wasn't anything super special. But the character relationship and interaction was just really good. And then to number 7, we got Maiu versus Hara. First off, after such a long time, especially one whole season without Maiu fighting, I'm just glad to see Maiu fighting again. And because these two characters are very close to each other, we're going to have a very good character relationship right here. I like Maiu's character here, basically aftermath of basically feeling all isolated, she's finally opening up to people, just for those same people that she's opening up to basically kind of leaving her without telling her anything. And basically Hara saying like she's not good enough for Maiu anymore because Maiu kind of just outgrown her, even though Maiu still wants Hara right there by her side, and basically just telling Hara that it's not her to decide if she's worthy or not. And I do kind of like Hara's motivation here. My main issue with this part is that Hara did not really get much build up on her motivation. It just lasted for kind of like 2 to 3 episodes and nothing really much happens. In a sense, you can say it was always there since OverDress season 2, feeling depressed after losing, but it wasn't really well built up in my opinion. The fight itself was pretty good because the fight actually was showing how serious the characters were and basically demonstrating the interaction of the characters, and I love that part. Unfortunately, we didn't get a new form of Visagra, but it was nice that we get to see both characters fight again. Hara getting Norlinger Mask was actually pretty cool, even though it was kind of a bad card. We got new weapons, which was also good to see, but the surprising part that I did not expect, Trick Moon OverDress with Vanguard. I did not expect that at all, and I love it. And I really love the symbolization here, because Visagra usually fights alone with Trick Moon, but now with Vanguard, they support everyone, and I love that, especially from her lore. So yeah, overall, a pretty good fight. The only thing I have a complaint about is basically the rush character motivation, even though it was actually still kind of there. And then to number 6, we got YuYu versus Laika, Season 1 WillDress finale. This is basically a big tournament finale where both players just give it their all, and I love that. Especially every moment of the fight was just really good, where you don't even know what's exactly going to happen because they make a very big deal out of it, especially with all the strategy play here. The character interactions is pretty good, especially when the characters in a way kind of know each other but do not acknowledge each other's basically style, but do conclude that they acknowledge each other as fighters. And I also kind of like the rivalry that was built up, and also the character arc that was kind of built up from the beginning of the season. YuYu basically trying to find a new path forward as a fighter without throwing away his past, while Raika trying to build his way as a fighter but throwing away his past doing so, and basically kind of forgets the meaning of being an actual true fighter. And I like the ending of the fight pretty well, because it actually shows Raika's character that he's just not taken up by the loss as much as he thought he would, because of course he's the type of character who hates losing, but he kind of learned something from here. Whether they enjoy fighting or not, they're all card fighters at the end, and I love that characterization of Raika here. And the fight itself was also pretty good. Like I said, it was intense. Every crossover dress and rebel form were used here, and I love it when a fight gives you everything that they have at the time. My only gripe is basically Raika's deck basically not updated with a set at the time, because there's no Sequana. But the big part that I find very surprising about this fight, which I also love, is the fact that YuYu was just using a regular OverDress OverDress unit. I was not expecting that at all, and I love that it actually helped him give him a victory like its tech option. The idea of not throwing away his old self like Rika did, aka OverDress, and just move on forward with it. Also, this fight has some pretty good visuals like Nirvana Jiva going after Yuberg, look at the size comparison, and also Garu Verlina versus Yuberg that was shown basically kind of in the opening. But overall, the character interaction was nice, the fight was pretty good, not the best in my opinion, but it was still very strong. But I will have to say, barely just missed from the top 5. And now to the top 5. This is where the hard part comes in. On the number 5 of my list, I have to put Toya vs Danji. OverDress Season 2, Episode 11. Now, of course, this being part of the OverDress, the fight isn't exactly super amazing when it comes to animation-wise, but I love the slice of life element here, and basically the character arcs of both characters. Like, this fight has been built up ever since the first season, and I love the conclusion of this fight as well. It's a well-earned victory for Toya. The other thing is basically character motivation. Danji is trying to just protect his sister and basically trying to pass down the torch as he gave up his leadership of Blackout. And speaking of which, he passed the leadership to Toya even though Toya has not consistently beat Danji, and this is another reason why this fight feels like it's an earned well victory for Toya. Toya is also trying to get a little bit of a character development after stuff he's done, especially to Blackout, and now he's the leader of the team. So in a way, it's a redemption arc for him as well, but also to find his new path forward. And he found his answer by fighting Danji here, and I love it. I also love Danji's little issue here as well, because all he's trying to do is protect his sister, but he doesn't like the way his sister is, but he's still staying by her side. But him losing is also in a way winning for him, because he found somebody who can actually help his sister. He's been trying to help his sister find a solution, never found it, but he found it through YuYu. That's the end of the fight, and I love that conclusion here too. So yeah, the character interactions was really good in this one, but I also love the fight itself, where it's nothing very bombastic other than Bastion Prime versus Unrivaled Bruce, because that was the bombastic part, but I love the fact that they don't just ride grade 4 and win. There was strategy from the game from beginning to end, especially from the beginning where Danji was basically questioning why Toya's change, even basically making risky moves like it's looking up ahead, and I like how those risky moves that Toya made actually paid off, which also makes a very good characterization of the characters here. And I love the conclusion of the fight. Everything that started with between them just ended with the same way, and I love it's in the role reversal here. And my favorite part here is that Toya gave his answer to Danji, and I just loved what type of answer he concluded with. Overall, character interaction was good, the fight was pretty good even though it's not all bombastic, and I just like it for that. But now if you really want a more bombastic fight, I really love Toya versus Rika. First off, of course, there's the parallel of Royal Paladin versus Shadow Paladin here, because White Knight versus Black Knight. Despite the reversal here being the White Knight being a dictator and the Black Knight being a rebellious, especially at the time, it was just a chore to see Toya fight again after so long. And basically, Rika needs to actually fight someone really strong to the point where it actually was pushing him further. And I like how Toya's playstyle applies here. He acknowledges that both of them are basically very similar because they're both very knight-like. And Toya acknowledging how he was basically like Rika, obsessed with winning at some point. And basically was just showing Rika something, and I love that as well. And also the aftermath of Toya's character arc from OverDress now basically just wants to get stronger, but for fun. And as for the fight itself, nothing amazing really happens until the grade 3 turns happens, obviously, especially once Bastion Prime appears. I love the screenshot of that, especially descending down the heavens, looking down on Yuberg, and I love the little lore symbolism here. The clash with Yuberg was also awesome. The reveal of Rebel Form Tempest was also awesome. But my favorite part was also the ending conclusion of the fight. Toya was not overwhelmed by Rika's strength. In fact, he actually respects Rika, and both characters just respect each other. And even Rika just acknowledging each other as fighters. And I just love it. It was a very good fight, and basically character interaction was pretty good, especially on how similar the characters are. And then to number 3, YuYu versus Michiru. I love this fight because this fight has been built up since the beginning of the season. And I really like Michiru's character here. He's not a guy who always likes to win. In fact, he's so strong that he's basically just trying to look for someone that can actually beat him in a fair fight. and basically just found YuYu as an interesting individual that can probably actually beat him. Especially what Donji told him about YuYu. I was also very interested in this fight since the beginning, and the fight was just really gorgeous overall. Especially this big obstacle that YuYu needs to overcome, because this is a very strong fighter and he's trying to reach to the top. Not only that he needs to beat this big obstacle of a fighter, but there's also another character that he's trying to fight as well, in which that one character wants to fight his current opponent, which in a way kind of makes the stakes a little higher, because of course his final opponent is going to be Rika, and Rika has been wanting to fight Michiru, but Michiru wants to fight YuYu. Little triangle thing here, but Michiru found YuYu interesting and he wants to see what it is. And I really like how YuYu is trying to overcome the unstoppable Michiru basically. Every moment of the fight basically shows how unstoppable Michiru is. I kind of love that. And the fight itself was just really good. The minute that Michiru rode Drajul, I love the field imagery change up. I just love it. And even though that YuYu was trying to turn things around, I really like how he realized that it did really not much to Michiru. Basically just another unstoppable force, and I just love how the fight emphasizes that. And YuYu's final turn, I just love it. With crossover dressing Balverina, and the shot between Balverina along with Nirvana Jiva was also pretty nice. Especially with Michiru seeing YuYu basically continue going on. Basically he's not giving up and trying to just give it his all until the very end. And I love how Balverina basically just symbolizes that here. With basically YuYu gambling everything with Balverina for the whole entire turn. To basically all the drive checks that YuYu did, to the final over trigger clash with YuYu winning. And I think that over trigger part is a little well earned, because yeah, it was built up to something like that. All the drive checks that he did just to get that. Yes, I get people hate over triggers, but I think this one was a little more of a well earned over trigger, even though yes, it's a 1 out of whatever chance here. But I like it for that reason. And I really like the conclusion of the fight where Michiru actually took the loss, because Michiru has been looking for someone to beat him, and somebody finally did. Miracle or not, he still accepted his defeat, and I just love it. Number 2, it's Laika versus Sophie, the final match. Another fight that has been built up since the beginning of WillDress Season 2 actually, and basically the finalization of Rika's character arc. After losing to Sophie really badly, of course this fight was going to happen again. And especially on top of Michiru beating him as well, and being told by Michiru himself, who he always looked up to, being weak, was definitely a big build-up here. It basically became a motivation for Rika to get stronger so one day he can surpass Michiru himself. But the unfortunate part is that Michiru got a coma, and thus he never really got a chance to fight Michiru again. And this is where Sophie kind of come in, because Sophie was built up to be a character to be pretty much as equal to Michiru. Especially during this fight, we got Sophie's backstory, even though it's a bit rushed since, like I said, in WillDress, they were kind of rushing everything, especially with character motivation. In Sophie's case is very similar to Michiru, where she was basically good at everything and no one could ever beat her. So she tried out Vanguard to see if someone can beat her, but nobody ever can. This is where Rika kind of comes in. Yes, he kind of beat her before, but not in basically in her full-on serious mode. And after losing to her being all serious, this is where Rika needs to overcome his obstacle, especially very similar to Michiru he always wants to beat. Because of course this is the character who has been known to be equal to Michiru. Especially the character interaction and the rivalry here was pretty good as well. Rika basically struggling to overcome his obstacle like YuYu did against Michiru, and Sophie just continuing taunting Rika on purpose just to see what Rika can do. And Rika doesn't even give up, he doesn't break, he just continues going on. Even though in anger, he still continues. And I also liked to see Sophie's true self here. Sophie's true self is very sadistic crazy when she finally finds someone who would actually stand up to her. Because of course, she's actually enjoying someone standing up to her. No one has ever stood up to her, but somebody finally did, and she was enjoying it. I love that part of her character. Basically an insane witch, and the fight itself was actually pretty good, showing that as turns go by, especially as they were talking about it, strategy was kind of going on. And the build up to the final turn, even though there was no breaking the rock, it was still pretty good, because the build up to the final turn was basically Rika using whatever resources and risk he has, learning from his past experience that risk must be necessary sometimes. And he made a risk by calling Gus and to see his drive checks, and it all pulled off really well because he got his full blast, his final rebel form basically. And I love the reveal of Full Blast here. It was just nice that all that pacing and build up just kind of build up to something awesome, and I just love it. And the conclusion of the fight was also pretty good. Rika even acknowledging Sophie as a fighter, which is also a really big sign because Sophie for once actually showed her true character as a fighter enjoying the fight, hence her sadistic looking nature. And basically Rika overall just acknowledging his opponent, and I just love it. And of course Sophie's ending of the fight just to continue on because somebody actually beat her in her serious state. And Rika's respecting others is also a very good character development for Rika. And now before we go to number 1, some honorable mentions. First off, YuYu versus Gi, the final match of the series or season. The only things I kind of liked about this fight, even though it wasn't like super amazing, was basically Gi's backstory, even though it was kind of rushed and it kind of makes no sense in some ways. Of course, the character interaction between YuYu and Gi basically trying to understand each other because Gi is basically an AI child. Gi using Brandgate instead of Dragon Empire because Gi usually plays the Griffo Gila deck with the same nation against his opponent, but this was a little bit more surprising, so I loved that part. In fact, this one nearly made it to my number 10 because of this. Griffo Gila Far text is always nice to see, and also the Stravarina. Of course, anime-like looking card, but it was just awesome to see. But once again, a little bit of a rush on the character development here, despite the fight being pretty okay. And then we got YuYu versus Ulala, the masked version. And I have to say this fight could have also made it to the top 10 list in a way because interaction was good. YuYu was basically trying to acknowledge Ulala's new playstyle even though it kind of made no sense to him. Especially on how Ulala is just giving up her identity here on her playstyle of hearing her cards. Even asking her if she still hears it. The fight was okay until we reached the ending with her looking at the mirror with Mirror's Verena. And Expecta's return was always nice. And finally Michiru versus Jinki, which was a pretty interesting fight, you could say. The reveal of Griffo Gila. The character interaction was also pretty nice, especially with Jinki just wanting to show Michiru something. And Michiru basically questioning the style of Jinki. And the fact of Michiru's ability to see basically the flames of people's soul, but he sees 2 flames instead of 1, so it made it questionable, which gives a little bit of a build-up on what might be the other soul. And basically kind of like the back and forth of this fight, even though this was more of a stall fight than anything, so it made it less entertaining. But I really like the strategy that Michiru has been coming up to overcome his obstacle. And also the ending of the fight where Michiru just basically smiles at Griffo Gila just finishing him off. Finally, to number 1, it's Danji versus Michiru, the one fight that was built up since the beginning of WillDress as well. In a way, it's a very good parallel to Mirai versus YuYu, or another good parallel would be Toya versus Danji. But I found this fight very awesome start to finish. First off, I like how both players were soul charging their over triggers because they had no choice and it was just unfortunate luck. And I like how both players even acknowledged that. They're both even having fun and the character interaction was really good. Because of course, both characters know each other and I like Michiru's a little bit of a motivation on what he's trying to do. And basically his intentions on why he decided to just join Uniformers anyway, and even decided to stay to the bitter end even though his life was in danger. Michiru is just holy damn. And I really like Danji's little struggle here too, because Danji has never beat Michiru before, but he never gave up. And Michiru always saw potential in Danji, so that was another thing as well. Was this the one day where Danji finally gets to beat Michiru? Because this fight was a little unpredictable as well, because there's several characters who want to fight Michiru and I was not expecting the result exactly. In fact, I was kind of expecting multiple results because Rika has a character development going on trying to beat Michiru as well. So we did not know what was going to happen in this fight and who was going to exactly win. But one conclusion I did find was that Michiru was probably going to die because it was based on the beginning scene of the first episode. And also for the fight, it was just really good. I like how the fight was just reflecting both players' characters as it was going. The jeweled mask was awesome to see again, especially Danji's struggle to just continue keeping up against Jeweled Mask's skill. And especially I like Michiru's character on seeing his opponent's playstyle, basically even remembering the cards in their hand through dry checks. And one big surprise I really love here is Danji using Jeweled himself. I was thinking that since Michiru gave him no counterblast, he calls the counter charges and basically tries to counter back. But nope, Danji gives one of the biggest moments and I love it. It even made me laugh, including even Michiru, that he was using Drajult instead. Even acknowledging Drajult's big highlight is that there's no counterblast needed for Drajult's main skill, and I love that moment. Unfortunately, Danji didn't win that turn, and I like it that way too because at least it wasn't like I get this new unexpected card and win. The fight became a lot less predictable because of that as well, because yeah, Danji kind of deserves the win right there because he used that unexpected move. But at that point, because Danji didn't win, we did not exactly know who was going to win the fight. And I love the final turn of the fight too. Basically, Danji gambling on Drajult's skill himself, and the symbolism of the final shot of Drajult with Vehemence Bruce. Basically the symbolization of their friendship, Bruce with Drajult. And Drajult looking at Drajult mask, basically looking at an old reflection of himself basically. I love that part. And I think this is one of the rare times that we get to see in a show where two very same units, even though one of them is masked, are basically facing against each other. And I love that. And of course, Danji overcomes his obstacle finally with everything he had left. And even though the agreement was to bring Michiru back to the real world, it was already too late. And either way, I think regardless how the fight was going to go, Michiru was still going to end up in that bad mental state. But overall, this was amazing with character and the fight. Kinda wish Silent Bark was here though. So that's it for my top 10 card fights of OverDress plus WillDress with the YuYu story. Hopefully it isn't completely too early and they just unexpectedly announce a new season with YuYu, but I think they said something that this was YuYu's final story, and overall I kinda liked it. As the show keeps running, the fights were kinda getting better actually. But as for characters and WillDress, they were kinda getting rushed out, and it's unfortunate that they were kinda rushed out because there was a lot of good characters, but not enough time to build them up. Some of them were very sudden as well, and there was actually some glimpses of it from episodes back, but it just comes out of kind of like nowhere. Wish that there was a little more episodes to give the character development part. But anyway, what do you guys think about my list on the top 10 and how would you rank them? What other fights would you include? Of course, remember this is all based on my opinion, so you can always have yours. And also, how do you guys feel about OverDress, WillDress overall? I just gave you my opinion just recently right now. But anyway, other than that, that's it for this. Until next time.